The wind screams across the Wyoming plains, a banshee's wail that claws at the edges of Danny Rodriguez's mind. It's February 2019, and Interstate 80 stretches before him like a frozen vein through the heart of nowhere, swallowed by a darkness so deep it feels alive. At midnight, the world is a canvas of black, pierced only by the twin beams of his rig's headlights, slicing through snowflakes that dance like ghosts in the frigid air. Danny, a veteran trucker with 15 years of asphalt under his belt, grips the wheel tighter, his breath fogging in the cab as the temperature plunges to -5. Tonight, something feels wrong. Something beyond the storm, beyond the cold. Something that makes the hairs on his neck stand like sentinels awaiting a threat. Danny Rodriguez was no stranger to the road's secrets. For over a decade, he'd hauled cargo from coast to coast, navigating blizzards, breakdowns, and the occasional reckless driver with the calm precision of a surgeon. His fellow truckers called him Steady Danny for his unflappable nature, a man who could stare down a jackknifed trailer on an icy slope and still crack a joke over the CB radio. But tonight, on this desolate stretch of I-80 between Laramie and Cheyenne, that steadiness was eroding, chipped away by an unease he couldn't name. The highway was empty unnaturally, so as if the world had held its breath and forgotten to exhale. No cars, no other rigs, just Danny and his load of electronics, bound for Chicago 2 hours behind schedule due to the storm's wrath. The wind howled a relentless force that rocked his truck, the trailer swaying slightly as he kept his speed at a cautious 50 miles per hour. The snow was light, but treacherous, coating the road in a slick sheen that demanded his full attention. Danny's eyes flicked to the dashboard, where the temperature gauge flickered and the radio hissed with static, a white noise that seemed to whisper secrets if he listened too closely. He adjusted his grip, his calloused hands steady despite the growing knot in his gut. This wasn't his first winter run, nor his first battle with Wyoming's brutal weather, but the isolation felt heavier tonight, as if the plains themselves were watching him, waiting for a misstep. Then he saw them. In the rearview mirror, 3 sets of headlights emerged from the darkness, cutting through the snow like the eyes of predators stalking prey. They were a 1/4 mile back, moving in perfect formation, 3 trucks aligned with a precision that felt unnatural. Danny squinted, trying to make out their shapes, but the storm blurred their outlines, leaving only the glow of their lights. He'd seen convoys before. Truckers often traveled together for safety in bad weather, but this was different. These trucks didn't waver, didn't drift, didn't break formation, even as the wind battered his own rig. They were tethered to him, an invisible chain linking them across the frozen asphalt. Danny reached for the CB radio, his lifeline to the outside world. "Hey, convoy. Behind me, you guys. Copy," he said, his voice steady, but laced with curiosity. The radio crackled, but no response came, only static that seemed to pulse with a rhythm, like a heartbeat buried in the noise. He tried again, switching to channel 19, the trucker's frequency. Eastbound driver at mile marker 235, looking to chat with the 3 rigs running behind me. Silence. The static grew louder, almost mocking, and for a moment, Danny swore he heard a whisper, a faint, garbled voice that seemed to say his name. He shook his head, chalking it up to fatigue, but the unease deepened, sinking into his bones, like the cold seeping through the cab. He glanced at the mirrors again. The trucks were still there, maintaining that exact quarter-mile distance, their headlights unwavering, despite the storm's chaos. Danny tested them, easing off the gas as he approached a steep grade, dropping his speed to 40. The convoy slowed in unison, matching his pace with eerie precision. When he accelerated on a straight stretch, pushing to 60, they followed suit, never closing the gap, never falling behind. It was as if they were bound to him, shadows cast by some unseen light. His heart thudded a slow, heavy rhythm that matched the pulse of the static. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The highway stretched on a ribbon of black, cutting through the endless plains, and Danny's mind raced. He'd heard stories every trucker had. Tales of ghost trucks, phantom hitchhikers, roads that led nowhere. But Danny was a practical man, grounded in the reality of diesel and deadlines. Those stories were for campfires, not for men like him. Yet the convoy behind him defied logic, their presence a silent challenge to everything he knew about the road. He tried the radio again, his voice sharper now. "Come on, guys. Someone's gotta be out there. Talk to me." The static answered a low hum that seemed to carry fragments of voices, words too faint to decipher, but heavy with intent. As he crested a hill near mile marker 240, Danny got his first clear look at the trucks in his mirrors. They were old relics from another era, their cabs boxy and angular, headlights round and dim, like models from the 1980s or early 90s. Trucks like that were rare, now replaced by sleek, modern rigs with LED lights and aerodynamic designs. But what chilled Danny's blood wasn't their age. It was their condition. Despite the snow and ice, their headlights burned without running lights, 6 glowing orbs that seemed to pierce the storm with unnatural clarity. No fog lights, no markers, just those eyes, watching him unblinking. The road ahead was empty, the storm swallowing any sign of civilization. Danny hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, a rarity even for I-80 in the dead of night. The plains felt alive, their vastness pressing in, as if the highway itself was conspiring to keep him isolated. His mind flickered to a story an old trucker had told him years ago about a convoy that appeared on winter nights, following drivers until they broke down or disappeared. Danny had laughed it off, but now, with those headlights burning in his mirrors, the memory felt like a warning he'd ignored. He decided to test the convoy further. At mile marker 250, a rest area loomed its sodium lights, casting a sickly yellow glow over the snow-covered lot. Danny signaled and pulled in, expecting the trucks to either stop or pass by. Instead, they slowed and parked at the far end of the lot, engines idling, headlights still fixed on him. In the dim light, he could see the silhouettes of drivers in each cab, motionless, their shapes indistinct, but unmistakably human. Or so he thought. The rest area was deserted. No other vehicles, no signs of life. The building housing the restrooms and vending machines was dark. A handwritten sign taped to the door. Closed until further notice. The words were scrawled in shaky, uneven letters, as if written by someone in a hurry or in fear. Danny's breath caught in his throat. The air felt heavy, charged with something he couldn't name. The shadows cast by the parking lot lights seemed to move, twisting in ways that defied the wind. He approached the building, his boots crunching in the snow, and peered at the sign. The paper was weathered, curling at the edges, but the ink looked fresh, too fresh, for a place abandoned in a storm. His pulse quickened. He glanced back at the trucks, their headlights still trained on him, their drivers still motionless. The cold bit into his skin, but it was the weight of their gaze that made him shiver. He climbed back into his cab, locking the door behind him. The convoy hadn't moved their engines, a low, steady hum that vibrated through the ground. Danny's hands trembled as he gripped the wheel, his mind screaming at him to leave, to get back on the road, to escape whatever was watching him. But the road ahead felt like a trap, and the convoy behind him felt like a noose tightening with every mile. He merged back onto I-80, his eyes darting to the mirrors. The trucks followed, falling into their perfect formation, a quarter-mile behind their headlights, cutting through the storm like knives. The night stretched on, endless and unforgiving. Danny's thoughts spiraled, caught between reason and the growing dread that something unnatural was at play. The convoy wasn't just following him, it was hunting him, pacing him, waiting for something. But what? His radio hissed again, the static now a constant drone, and he swore he heard his name whispered in a voice that wasn't human, a voice that knew him, that saw him, that wanted him. The road was no longer just a highway, it was a predator, and Danny was its prey. The static on Danny's CB radio crackles like a dying fire, each burst of noise carrying fragments of voices that shouldn't exist. The highway stretches into oblivion, a frozen scar across the Wyoming plains, and the 3 trucks behind him remain relentless, their headlights a constant reminder of the unseen threat. Danny's heart pounds, a drumbeat echoing in the confined space of his cab, where the air grows colder despite the heater's desperate hum. He's alone, or so he tells himself, but the radio whispers otherwise, its voices growing clearer, calling to him, pulling him into a darkness deeper than the storm outside. Danny tried to focus on the road, on the rhythm of driving, on the familiar weight of the steering wheel in his hands. But the convoy behind him was a splinter in his mind, impossible to ignore. Their headlights never wavered, never flickered, as if powered by something beyond diesel and batteries. He'd driven this stretch of I-80 countless times, knew its curves and grades like the lines on his palms. But tonight, it felt alien, as if the highway had rewritten itself in the storm's shadow. The mile markers ticked by 242, 243, 244. But each one felt like a step deeper into a trap he couldn't see. He cycled through the CB channels again, desperate for contact, for a human voice to break the spell of the night. Anyone out there? This is eastbound driver at mile marker 245. Got a convoy of 3 rigs, tailing me, acting strange. Anyone copy? The static surged a wave of white noise that drowned his words. But beneath it, he heard something new, a low guttural murmur, like voices speaking in a language he didn't understand. The sound sent a chill down his spine, not because of its strangeness, but because it felt deliberate, as if the voices were choosing their words, choosing him. Danny's mind raced, grasping for explanations. Maybe the trucks were part of a test, some new autonomous driving tech being trialed in secret. He'd read about self-driving rigs, prototypes, that could navigate without a human touch. But these trucks were old relics from a time before computers ruled the road. Their cabs, visible in fleeting glimpses through the snow, were angular, their chrome tarnished, their paint faded to a ghostly gray. No company ran trucks like that anymore, not on a major interstate, not in a storm like this. And yet, they moved with a precision that mocked human skill, their formation unbroken, their intent unclear. He tried to shake the fear creeping into his chest, but it clung to him, heavy and cold. Danny wasn't a man who scared easily. He'd faced down black ice, blown tires, and drivers high on meth swerving into his lane. But this was different. This wasn't a problem he could fix with a wrench or a quick maneuver. This was something that didn't belong in his world, something that knew his name and followed him through the dark. He glanced at the dashboard clock, 2:17 a.m. The night felt endless, the hours stretching like the highway itself, pulling him deeper into its grasp. The static on the radio shifted, and a voice broke through, clear and sharp, slicing through the noise like a blade. "Danny Rodriguez, you're running late." The words were calm, almost conversational, but they hit him like a physical blow. His name, spoken by a stranger, carried a weight that made his breath catch. The voice was male, low, and gravelly, with an accent he couldn't place, somewhere between the Midwest and nowhere at all. "You're 2 hours behind. Chicago's waiting, but the road's got other plans for you tonight." Danny's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white. "Who's this? How do you know my name?" he demanded, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his chest. The radio went silent, the static retreating like a tide, leaving only the hum of his engine and the wail of the wind. He waited, his eyes flicking between the road and the mirrors, where the convoy's headlights glowed like embers in the storm. No response came, but the silence was worse, heavy with the promise of something watching, something waiting. He tried to reason it out. Maybe it was a prank, some bored trucker messing with him on a quiet night. But the voice had known his name, his schedule, his destination. That wasn't a prank. It was personal. Danny's mind flickered to the stories again, the ones he'd dismissed as folklore. The old trucker's tale about the westbound freight convoy, 3 trucks lost in a blizzard in '87, their drivers never found. The story had been a warning, a ghost tale for newbies, but now it felt like a prophecy unfolding behind him. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the road. The snow was thickening, the flakes swirling in his headlights, like a swarm of insects, each one catching the light and vanishing into the dark. The mile markers crept by each one, a reminder of how far he was from help, from safety, from anything human. At mile marker 260, the road dipped into a shallow valley, the plains rising on either side like silent sentinels. The convoy followed their headlights, dipping in unison, their presence a constant pressure at the edge of his awareness. Danny tried the radio again, cycling through every channel, his voice growing sharper with each attempt. "This is Danny Rodriguez, eastbound on I-80. I've got 3 trucks tailing me. No running lights, no response. Anyone out there? I need a hand." The static roared back louder now, and the voices returned overlapping, fragmented like a chorus of the damned. "Danny, cold out here. Join us." The words were faint, carried on the wind, but they pierced his heart like shards of ice. He slammed the radio off his hands, shaking, but the voices lingered, echoing in his mind, pulling him toward a truth he didn't want to face. The convoy was closer now, or so it seemed. Their headlights loomed larger in the mirrors, their shapes more defined despite the storm. Danny could make out the cabs, now their windows dark, their silhouettes empty. No drivers, no movement, just the trucks rolling forward with a purpose he couldn't comprehend. His pulse raced his breath, coming in short, sharp bursts. He was a rational man, a man of schedules and logbooks, but the road was unraveling, that rationality stripping it away like paint under a sand blaster. He decided to push harder, to outrun them, to break whatever hold they had. He pressed the accelerator, the truck groaning as it climbed to 65, then 70, the trailer swaying dangerously on the icy road. The convoy matched his speed, their headlights never wavering their formation, as tight as ever. It was impossible, unnatural a violation of everything he knew about driving. No trucker could maintain that kind of precision in a storm, not without years of experience. And even then, not like this. These weren't truckers. These weren't trucks. These were something else. Something that belonged to the night, to the cold, to the highway's hidden heart. Danny's mind spun, caught in a loop of fear and disbelief. He thought of his wife, Maria, waiting for him in California. Her voice on the phone 2 nights ago, warm and steady, grounding him. He thought of his daughter, Sophia, her laughter filling their small apartment, a light against the darkness now closing in. He clung to those memories, anchoring himself against the growing terror. But the convoy's presence was a tide pulling him under, drowning him in its relentless pursuit. The radio crackled again. Unprompted, the power switch still off. The voice returned colder, now more insistent. Danny, you can't outrun the road. It's been waiting for you. We've been waiting. The words were a command, an invitation, a promise of something eternal and terrible. Danny's hands froze on the wheel. His eyes locked on the mirrors, where the trucks seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Their headlights flickering, like the eyes of something ancient, something hungry. The engine sputters a death rattle that echoes in Danny's chest as his truck lurches to a stop on the shoulder of I-80. The dashboard glows red, the temperature gauge screaming failure, the smell of burning coolant filling the cab like a poison. Outside, the storm rages, snow piling against the windshield, blotting out the world. Mile marker 285 looms in the distance, its numbers barely visible through the blizzard, but they burn in Danny's mind like a curse. The convoy is out there, waiting, their headlights glowing through the snow, and the radio hums with voices that know too much, voices that want him to join them in a cold that never ends. The truck's engine died with a final choking gasp, leaving Danny stranded in the heart of the storm. The cab was a fragile cocoon, its warmth fading as the cold seeped through the steel and glass. He flipped on the hazard lights, their orange glow pulsing weakly against the darkness, a signal to no one. The highway was a graveyard, empty, except for the convoy, their headlights now closer parked just beyond the rest area's boundary, their engines idling with a low, predatory hum. Danny's breath fogged in the air, each exhale a reminder of how quickly the cold could kill. He checked the gauges again, hoping for a miracle. But the temperature needle was pinned in the red, the oil pressure non-existent. This wasn't a simple breakdown. He'd maintained this truck like a child, checking every hose, every bolt, every fluid level before this run. A failure this sudden, this complete, was impossible. Yet here he was, stranded at mile marker 285, a number that felt like a gravestone. His mind flashed to the old trucker's story, the one about the westbound freight convoy. 3 drivers lost in a blizzard, their trucks found empty, their fates a mystery. Danny had laughed then, but now the story was a weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. He grabbed his cell phone, praying for a signal, but the screen mocked him with a single word: no service. The radio was his only hope. But when he turned it back on, the static was gone, replaced by a conversation that made his blood run cold. 3 voices, male. Calm, discussing the weather, the road, their delivery schedule. They spoke of truck stops, long demolished construction zones, completed decades ago, as if time had frozen for them in 1987. We've got a driver broken down at mile marker 285. One voice said, its tone casual but edged with malice. Should we go back and help him? Nah. Another replied, let him freeze. We've got a schedule to keep. The third voice laughed, a sound like wind tearing through a desolate canyon. He'll be joining us soon enough, anyway. Danny's heart stopped. They were talking about him. They knew where he was, what had happened, as if they'd orchestrated the breakdown, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. He stared at the radio, its green glow casting shadows across the cab, and whispered, "Who are you?" The response was immediate, chilling. "Don't worry, Danny," the first voice said, its tone soft but venomous. "The cold isn't so bad once you get used to it. We've been driving these roads for 37 years, and the winter nights don't bother us anymore." Danny's hands shook as he turned the radio off, but the words lingered, burrowing into his mind like parasites. 37 years. The math clicked into place. 1987, the year the westbound freight drivers vanished. These weren't men. These were ghosts bound to the highway, bound to the cold, bound to whatever force kept them driving through the decades. He looked in the mirrors, expecting to see the convoy closer, but they hadn't moved. Their headlights burned through the snow, steady, unyielding, like the gaze of something ancient and patient. Danny's mind raced, searching for options. He had maybe an hour before the cab's heat was gone, before hypothermia set in. He could try to walk, but the nearest town was miles away, and the storm would kill him long before he reached it. He could wait, hope for another driver, but the highway was empty, as if the world had abandoned him to this moment, to these trucks, to their invitation. Then he saw its headlights approaching from behind. Not the convoy's cold, flickering beams, but something warmer, steadier. Hope surged in his chest, a fragile flame against the cold. The convoy's lights wavered, as if sensing the intrusion, and Danny held his breath as the new vehicle drew closer. It was a Wyoming State Troopers patrol car, its red and blue lights cutting through the storm like a lifeline. The convoy's trucks moved not forward, but backward, their headlights retreating into the darkness, their engines fading into the wind. The trooper's PA system crackled. Driver of the disabled vehicle. This is Wyoming State Police. Are you all right in there? Danny grabbed the CB radio, his voice trembling with relief. I'm okay, officer. Engine overheated, but there are 3 trucks here that... He stopped glancing in the mirrors. The convoy was gone, vanished, as if they'd never been there. The trooper pulled up behind him, his flashlight bobbing in the snow as he approached the cab. Danny opened the door, the cold biting into his skin, and explained what had happened. The convoy, the voices, the breakdown, the name, westbound freight. The trooper listened, his face unreadable, his eyes scanning the empty highway. When Danny finished, the officer's voice was low, heavy, with a knowledge Danny didn't want to hear. You're not the first to report seeing westbound freight trucks on this stretch. We get 3 or 4 reports a year, always in winter, always around mile marker 285. Back in 87, we found their trucks right here. Engines running heaters on, but the cabs frozen solid, like they'd been empty for days. No trace of the drivers. Danny's stomach twisted. The trooper's words were an anchor, grounding him in a reality he couldn't escape. The convoy wasn't just a story, it was real, and it had chosen him. The officer helped him fix the truck a loose coolant hose that shouldn't have caused the failure it did. As they worked, Danny felt the weight of the night pressing down the highway, watching, waiting for him to make a choice: stay on the road or run from it forever. The patrol car's lights flash red and blue, a beacon in the storm. But Danny feels no safety in their glow. The convoy is gone, but their presence lingers, a shadow etched into the snow, into the air, into his soul. The trooper works on the engine, his hands steady, despite the biting cold. But Danny's eyes are locked on the mirrors, searching for headlights, for the ghosts that know his name. The highway is silent now, but silence is a lie, a mask for the voices that wait. The offer they made, the cold eternity they promised. The trooper's flashlight danced over the engine, illuminating the tangle of hoses and wires. "Loose coolant hose," he said, his voice muffled by the wind. "Shouldn't have killed your engine like that, but we'll get you running." Danny nodded, his mind elsewhere, replaying the voices on the radio, their words a hook in his heart. "Join us. The cold isn't so bad." He wanted to believe it was a hallucination, a trick of the storm. But the trooper's story about the westbound freight drivers found frozen, their trucks abandoned, made denial impossible. The highway had a memory, and it wasn't letting go. As the trooper worked, Danny sat in the cab, the heater sputtering back to life. Its warmth, a frail defense against the cold, seeping through the glass. He checked his phone again. Still no signal. The screen a blank accusation. The radio was silent, but he didn't dare turn it on, afraid of what he might hear. The convoy was gone, but he felt them, their presence, a weight in the air, a pressure behind his eyes. He closed them, trying to shut out the night. But the darkness behind his lids was alive with their headlights, their voices, their invitation. The trooper climbed into the cab, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're good to go. Hose was loose, but it's fixed. You sure you're okay to drive?" Danny knotted his throat tight. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just what you said about those trucks. You really think they're still out here?" The trooper's eyes darkened, his gaze drifting to the highway. Some roads hold on to their ghosts. This one's been holding on to those drivers since '87. They don't just haunt, they're looking for company. Danny's hands tightened on the wheel. Company. The trooper leaned closer, his voice low. Every driver who's seen them says the same thing. They offer a ride, a way out of the cold. But no one who takes it comes back. 3 drivers in the last 32 years gone at this exact spot. Their trucks were found just like yours, engines, running cabs frozen. You're lucky I came along when I did. Lucky. The word felt hollow, a lie. Danny started the engine, its rumble a comfort he didn't trust. The trooper stepped back his flashlight, cutting through the snow. "Get to Chicago, Danny, and stay off this stretch in winter." Danny nodded, pulling onto the highway, his eyes flicking to the mirrors. The patrol car followed for a few miles, then turned off its lights, swallowed by the storm. The road was empty again, but Danny knew better. The convoy was out there, waiting their headlights, just beyond the edge of his vision. He drove on the mile markers, ticking by 286, 287, 288. But each one felt like a step deeper into their territory. The radio stayed off, but the silence was worse, filled with the memory of their voices, their offer. "Join us." The words were a siren's call, promising rest release, an end to the cold. But Danny knew better. He'd seen the emptiness in their headlights, the hunger in their silence. They weren't offering salvation. They were offering oblivion. The storm eased slightly, the snow thinning enough to reveal the faint outlines of the plains, their vastness both beautiful and terrifying. Danny's mind wandered to Maria, to Sophia, to the life waiting for him beyond this road. He clung to those thoughts, using them to anchor himself against the pull of the night. But the highway had other plans. At mile marker 290, the radio crackled to life. Again, unprompted, the static returning like a tide. "Danny," the voice said, softer now, almost tender. "You're tired. The road's long. We can take you where it's warm, where it's quiet." He slammed his fist on the radio, silencing it. But the voice echoed in his mind, weaving through his thoughts like smoke. The cold was seeping in again, the heater struggling against an unnatural chill. Danny's breath fogged his fingers numb despite the gloves. He pushed the truck harder, the speedometer climbing to 70, then 75, the trailer swaying dangerously. He didn't care. He had to escape, had to outrun the convoy, had to make it to dawn, to light, to life. But the headlights returned. Faint at first, then brighter, closer. They were back, their formation, perfect, their presence undeniable. Danny's heart pounded, his vision blurring with fear and exhaustion. He wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything but drive into their trap. But the road was relentless, its curves and grades, a maze designed to keep him here, to deliver him to them. The voices on the radio grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of the lost. "Danny, you belong with us. The road chose you. It always chooses." He gripped the wheel, his knuckles aching, and whispered a prayer, something he hadn't done since childhood. The words felt foreign, fragile, but they were all he had. The convoy was closer now, their headlights filling the mirrors, their engines a low growl that vibrated through the cab. Danny's eyes burned his body, trembling, but he refused to stop, refused to give in. The highway was a battleground, and he was fighting for more than his life. He was fighting for his soul. The dawn is a distant promise, hidden behind the storm's unyielding veil. Danny's truck roars through the night, a lone beast fleeing a pack that never tires. The convoy is behind him, their headlights a constant threat, their voices a whisper in his mind, urging him to surrender. Mile marker 295 passes, then 296, each one a victory, each one a reminder of how far he is from safety. The cold is a living thing now, wrapping around him, promising an eternity of ice and darkness. But Danny Rodriguez is a fighter, and he will not let the highway claim him. The truck's engine roared a defiant cry against the storm, but Danny could feel it straining, as if the cold itself was choking the life from it. The convoy was relentless, their headlights closer now, their presence a weight that pressed against his chest, making every breath a struggle. He'd been driving for hours or so, it seemed, but the clock on the dashboard was frozen at 3:47 a.m., as if time itself had joined the conspiracy. The highway stretched on endless, unchanging a loop, designed to trap him in its icy embrace. Danny's mind was a battlefield torn between fear and determination. He thought of the troopers' words, the stories of drivers lost at mile marker 285, their trucks found frozen, their fates unknown. He thought of the westbound freight convoy, 3 men who'd vanished in '87, their names forgotten, but their presence eternal. He wondered what they'd seen, what they'd felt, what had made them take the offer he was fighting to refuse. The voices on the radio had promised warmth, rest and end to the cold, but Danny knew it was a lie, a trap baited with the hope of escape. He pushed the truck harder, the speedometer nudging 80, the trailer groaning under the strain. The road was slick, the snow piling higher, but Danny didn't care. He had to break free, had to reach the edge of this nightmare, had to find a way back to the world he knew. The convoy matched his speed, their headlights blazing their engines, a chorus of menace. He could see them clearly now, their cabs empty, their windows dark, their shapes warped by the storm into something monstrous, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The radio crackled again, the voices louder, more desperate. Danny, you can't run forever. The road is ours. It's always been ours. The words were a command, a plea, a threat wrapped in sorrow. Danny's hands shook. His eyes, burning with tears, he refused to let fall. He thought of Maria's smile, Sophia's laughter, the warmth of their home. He thought of every mile he'd driven, every load he'd delivered, every promise he'd kept. He was steady Danny, and he would not break. Not now, not ever. At mile marker 300, the storm began to ease, the snow thinning, the wind softening. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a faint gray that pushed back the darkness. Danny's heart lifted a spark of hope, igniting in his chest. The convoy's headlights flickered their glow, weakening as if the light was poison to them. He pushed the truck to its limit, the engine screaming, the tires fighting for traction. The voices on the radio grew fainter, their words dissolving into static, into silence, and then they were gone. The headlights vanished, the mirrors empty, the highway stretching ahead without a trace of the convoy. Danny's breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. He didn't slow down, didn't stop, didn't dare look back. He drove until the sun broke through its light, warm, and real, washing away the night's terror. At mile marker 310, he pulled into a truck stop, its neon signs a beacon of normalcy, its parking lot filled with rigs and drivers, living, breathing human. Danny never drove I-80 again. He switched to southern routes, adding days to his runs, but he didn't care. The extra miles were a small price to pay for escaping the convoy, for keeping his soul out of their grasp. The Wyoming State Police confirmed the trooper's story. 17 reports of the westbound freight convoy, 3 drivers, lost forever. Officer Mitchell Thompson, who'd saved Danny, retired 6 months later. His final words, haunting. Some roads hold on to their ghosts, and some ghosts want more than to haunt. They're looking for drivers to join them, to keep the convoy running. Danny still hears the voices sometimes, late at night, when the road is quiet and the stars are bright. They call to him, their words a whisper in the dark, promising rest, promising eternity. But Danny Rodriguez is a survivor, and he knows the truth. The highway is alive, and it's always watching, always waiting for the next driver to claim. The highway stretched endlessly before Lisa Patterson's rig, its asphalt veins pulsing under the weight of her 18-wheeler. But tonight, something was wrong. Terribly wrong. A detour sign flickered in her headlights, its reflective surface glinting like a predator's eye, luring her off Interstate 40 into a labyrinth of rural roads that seemed to twist into nowhere, whispering her name in the humid August air of 2021. Lisa gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles whitening as the Arkansas night pressed against her windshield. 8 years hauling furniture across the country had honed her instincts, her mental map of America's highways sharper than any GPS. But tonight, the road felt like a stranger. She'd been ahead of schedule, cruising toward Texas with a load of oak dressers and mahogany tables when construction forced her off the interstate. The detour signs, weathered and peeling, pointed her onto Highway 67 South, a route she vaguely recalled from a trip 2 years prior. The air was thick, heavy, with the scent of damp earth and something sour, like rotting fruit, left too long in the sun. Her dashboard clock read 10:47 p.m., and the world beyond her headlights was a void swallowing every trace of civilization. The road narrowed asphalt, crumbling into gravel, then dirt, as if the earth itself were unraveling. Trees loomed on both sides, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky, blocking the moonlight, until only slivers pierced the canopy. Lisa's GPS flickered its signal, stuttering, before dying entirely. She cursed under her breath, tapping the screen, but it remained blank, a useless slab of plastic. Her CB radio crackled, spitting static that sounded almost like words, disjointed, urgent, but unintelligible. "Keep driving, Lisa. Don't stop." The thought wasn't her own, yet it burrowed into her mind, cold and insistent. She shook it off, focusing on the road, but the unease grew, a weight settling in her chest. The first sign of something truly wrong came at a crossroads, unmarked by any signpost. A rusted mailbox, shaped like a cow, stood sentinel. Its paint chipped its mouth, yawning open, as if screaming. Lisa slowed her headlights, catching the glint of fresh tire tracks in the dirt driveway leading to a farmhouse. The house itself was a skeletal relic, its windows shattered, its porch sagging like an old man's spine. Yet a faint glow flickered inside, not the warm yellow of a lamp, but a sickly green, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lisa's pulse quickened. She'd seen abandoned houses before. Decades of trucking had shown her plenty, but this one felt alive, watching her. She pressed the accelerator. The engine's roar a fleeting comfort. The road twisted, forcing her to slow again as it wound through dense woods. Her headlights swept over a field barren and gray. The soil cracked like scorched skin. No crops grew here, though it was late summer when fields should burst with life. Instead, the ground was littered with dead vines, curling like skeletal fingers. Lisa's breath hitched. Something about this place felt wrong. Not just abandoned, but rejected by the world. The air grew heavier, pressing against her lungs, carrying that same sour stench, now laced with something metallic, like blood. Her rig rumbled past another farmhouse, this one with a red barn half collapsed, its roof gaping like a wound. Again, fresh tire tracks marked the driveway, but the house was dark, its windows blind. A child's tricycle lay overturned in the yard, its wheels caked with mud, as if it had been abandoned mid-ride. Lisa's mind raced. Who lives out here? Why are there tire tracks, but no people? She glanced at her odometer, noting she'd driven 40 miles since leaving the interstate. The detour shouldn't have taken her this far. Her gut twisted, urging her to turn back, but the road was too narrow for a U-turn. She was trapped, funneled deeper into the unknown. The CB radio crackled again, a voice breaking through the static. Not a trucker's drawl, but a low, guttural murmur. Lisa, you're lost, but we see you. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed the mic, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her throat. This is Lisa Patterson, eastbound on Highway 67. Who's this identify yourself? Silence answered the heavy and deliberate, as if the speaker were savoring her panic. She cycled through channels, but the radio stayed dead, the static now a low hum, like a swarm of insects buzzing inside her skull. Lisa's eyes darted to her side mirrors, expecting to see headlights, a car, anything. But the road behind her was empty, a black void swallowing her taillights. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches scraping the sides of her trailer, a sound like nails on bone. She forced herself to focus, to breathe, but the world felt wrong, as if reality itself were bending around her. The mailbox, shaped like a cow, appeared again, identical to the one she'd passed 20 minutes earlier. Her odometer hadn't moved. That's impossible. She floored the gas, desperate to outrun the impossible. But the road only tightened its grip, pulling her deeper into its heart. The farmhouse reappeared, its green glow, pulsing faster, now synchronized with her racing pulse. The tricycle was there again, but now it stood upright, as if someone had set it ready for a child to ride. Lisa's hands trembled on the wheel. She wasn't just lost, she was caught in something alive, something that knew her name. Don't stop, Lisa. Keep moving. The thought came again louder, not a suggestion, but a command. She obeyed her rig, thundering through the night. But the road refused to release her, looping her back to the same cursed landmarks, each one more menacing than the last. The night tightened its chokehold on Lisa Patterson's rig, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the darkness itself were breathing down her neck. Every mile she drove felt like a descent into a nightmare. The rural roads of Arkansas coiling around her like a snake, each turn revealing the same rusted cow mailbox, the same decaying farmhouse, the same dead field staring at her with hollow eyes. Lisa's dashboard glowed faintly, the only light in a world that seemed to reject illumination. The sour metallic stench had seeped into the cab, clinging to her clothes, her skin, her thoughts. She checked her odometer again, still frozen at 40 miles, as if time and distance had conspired to trap her. The CB radio hummed a low drone that vibrated in her bones, occasionally spitting out fragments of words. Lisa, closer. We're waiting. She yanked the power cord from the radio, silencing it, but the hum lingered now, inside her head, a relentless pulse urging her to surrender. The road twisted sharply, forcing her to slow to a crawl. Her headlights caught a new landmark, a dead tree. Its branches twisted into shapes that looked almost human, reaching for the sky in silent agony. She'd seen it before, maybe 10 minutes ago. Or was it an hour? Time was unraveling, slipping through her fingers like sand. The tree appeared again after another mile, identical, its gnarled limbs seeming to shift as her lights passed over them, as if they were turning to watch her. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps. This isn't real. It can't be. But the weight in her chest told her otherwise. She passed another farmhouse, this one smaller, its white paint peeling like flayed skin. A porch light burned, casting a pale, flickering glow across the yard. Lisa slowed her eyes, drawn to the porch, where a rocking chair swayed gently, though no wind stirred the air. The chair's motion was slow, deliberate, as if someone had just stepped away. In the yard, a sandbox sat, filled with gray, gritty sand that shimmered faintly in her headlights. Scattered around it were toys, a plastic doll with one eye missing a toy truck, half buried, a jump rope tangled like a noose. They weren't just abandoned. They were arranged, positioned, as if children had been playing moments ago, then vanished. Lisa's instinct screamed at her to keep driving, but her pride, the same pride that had carried her through 8 years of navigating America's highways, demanded answers. She needed to know where she was, how to get back to the interstate. The road was too narrow to turn her rig around, but a house with lights meant people, and people meant directions. She pulled into the gravel driveway, the crunch of tires loud in the oppressive silence. The farmhouse loomed larger, now its windows dark, except for that single porch light, which flickered as if struggling to stay alive. She killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening. Her breath fogged in the cab, though the August night was warm. She grabbed her flashlight and a tire iron from under the seat. Not for defense, she told herself, but just in case. Stepping out, the air hit her like a physical force, cold and thick, carrying that metallic tang, now mixed with something sweeter, like decaying flowers. The ground felt soft, almost spongy, as if it might swallow her boots. She approached the porch, her flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, revealing more toys in the yard. A tricycle with a bent wheel, a stuffed bear missing an arm, all covered in a fine layer of dust, untouched by time. Lisa knocked on the door, the sound echoing unnaturally, as if the house itself were amplifying it. No answer. She knocked again harder, her voice breaking the silence. Hello? I'm a truck driver. I'm lost. Can you help me with directions? The porch light flickered, dimming, then flaring bright. Inside, she heard movement, a faint shuffle, like bare feet on wood, followed by a low murmur, too soft to make out. Her flashlight swept the windows, catching a glimpse of something, a shadow, maybe, or a curtain twitching. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. You're a professional, Lisa. You've handled worse. She knocked a third time, louder, her voice firm. Please, I just need directions back to Highway 67. The shuffling stopped, replaced by a new sound, a chorus of whispers, overlapping, urgent, like a crowd debating in hushed tones. Lisa stepped back, her tire iron heavy in her hand. The porch light went out, plunging the yard into darkness, her flashlight now the only source of illumination. She swung the beam toward the sandbox, and her breath caught. The sand was moving, rippling, as if something beneath it were stirring, pushing upward. The toys shifted the doll's head, turning slightly, its single eye seeming to meet hers. Lisa stumbled back toward her truck, her pulse roaring in her ears. The whispers grew louder, no longer inside the house, but all around her, carried on the air like a swarm of insects. "Stay, Lisa. You belong here." She climbed into the cab, slamming the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. She threw the truck into gear, gravel spraying as she pulled out the farmhouse, shrinking in her mirrors. But as she glanced back, she saw the porch light was back on, and the rocking chair was moving again faster, now, as if someone were rocking with frantic urgency. The road stretched ahead, but the landmarks didn't change. The cow mailbox reappeared, its rusted surface gleaming as if polished. The dead tree loomed again, its branches now twisted into new shapes, almost forming a word. Stay. Lisa's mind raced, grasping for logic. This is a loop. I'm not moving forward. She checked her odometer. Still 40 miles. Her GPS was dead, her radio silent, but the whispers lingered now inside her skull, urging her to stop, to surrender. You can't outrun us, Lisa. We've been waiting. The road curled around Lisa Patterson, like a noose tightening with every mile she drove, yet refusing to let her escape. The same cow mailbox, the same dead tree, the same forsaken farmhouse flickered past her headlights like a film reel, stuck on repeat. Each cycle more suffocating, more sinister, as if the night itself were alive and hungry for her fear. Lisa's hands gripped the wheel, her palms slick with sweat. The odometer mocked her, frozen at 40 miles, as if the road had erased her progress, trapping her in a nightmare that refused to end. The air in the cab was frigid now, her breath visible in the August heat, an impossible contradiction that gnawed at her sanity. The sour, metallic smell had thickened, coating her tongue, her throat making every breath a struggle. She tried to focus on the road, on the rhythm of driving, but the world outside her windshield was no longer just a landscape. It was a predator, watching, waiting, whispering her name. The dead tree appeared again, its branches now unmistakably forming shapes, faces, maybe, or hands reaching out. Lisa blinked hard, telling herself it was exhaustion, a trick of the light. But the faces didn't fade. They sharpened their hollow eyes, following her as she passed. The cow mailbox gleamed in her headlights, its rusted surface now polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting her truck's silhouette, distorted as if the vehicle itself were melting. She floored the accelerator, The engines roar a desperate plea for escape. But the road looped back, relentless, delivering her to the same red barn, its collapsed roof gaping like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. Lisa's mind scrambled for answers. 8 years on the road had taught her to trust her instincts, to read the signs. Weather, traffic, mechanical issues. But this was different. This wasn't a storm or a blown tire. This was something that defied logic, something that knew her, that wanted her. She tried the CB radio again, cycling through channels, her voice hoarse. This is Lisa Patterson, eastbound on somewhere off Highway 67. Can anyone hear me? I need help. The static roared back, but beneath it, the whispers returned clearer. Now, a chorus of voices speaking as one. You're home, Lisa. You're ours. She slammed the radio off, but the voices didn't stop. They were in the air, in the hum of the engine, in the creak of her seat. Her flashlight lay on the passenger seat, its beam still on, casting erratic shadows across the cab. The shadows moved when they shouldn't, forming shapes, fingers, faces, eyes that vanished when she looked directly at them. Lisa's heart thundered, her training kicking in. Stay calm. Find a way out. She needed a plan, a landmark, anything to break this loop. The road was too narrow for a U-turn, but there had to be an intersection, a wider stretch, where she could turn her rig around and backtrack to the interstate. The farmhouse appeared again, its green glow pulsing faster, brighter, like a beacon drawing her in. Lisa's eyes locked on the sandbox in the yard, the sand still rippling now, forming patterns, spirals, symbols, words she couldn't read, but felt in her bones. The tricycle was upright again. Its handlebars turned toward her, as if inviting her to ride. She forced her gaze away, focusing on the road, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Stop, Lisa. Stay with us. The air grew colder, the cab's heater useless against the chill that seemed to seep from the world itself. She passed a new landmark, a rusted farm implement, half buried in a field, its blades gleaming as if freshly sharpened. It hadn't been there before, or had it? Her memory blurred the loop, eroding her sense of reality. She tried to recall the interstate, the detour signs, but the details slipped away, replaced by images of the cow mailbox, the dead tree, the farmhouse. They're rewriting my mind. The thought hit her like a punch, her fear sharpening into resolve. She wasn't just lost. She was being hunted, manipulated by something that wanted her to forget to surrender. Lisa slowed at the next intersection, her headlights sweeping over a dirt road branching off to the right. It was wider, just enough for a U-turn, if she was careful. She maneuvered the rig, her hands steady, despite the panic clawing at her chest. The trailer groaned as she turned the tires, sinking into the soft earth. Halfway through the turn, her headlights caught something, a figure standing at the edge of the road, motionless, staring. It was a woman, middle-aged in a white nightgown, stained with dark, wet patches that glistened like oil. Her face was pale, her eyes empty, but her lips curled into a smile that wasn't human, too wide, too sharp. Lisa froze, her foot hovering over the accelerator. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, her gaze boring into Lisa's soul. "Don't look at her. Keep moving." Lisa completed the turn her rig, now facing the opposite direction. But the woman was still there, now closer, standing in the middle of the road. Lisa's breath caught. She didn't walk. She just appeared. The woman's smile widened, revealing teeth that glinted like needles. Lisa floored the gas, the truck lurching forward, but the woman didn't move, didn't flinch, as if daring Lisa to hit her. The rig roared past the woman's figure, a blur in the side mirror. Lisa's heart pounded, her eyes darting between the road and the mirrors. The woman was gone, but the road hadn't changed, the cow mailbox, the dead tree. The farmhouse loomed ahead again, as if her turn had meant nothing. The loop was tightening, the whispers now, a scream in her mind. "You can't leave, Lisa. You're ours forever." The Arkansas night had become a living thing, its darkness wrapping around Lisa Patterson's rig like a shroud, the road a relentless trap that mocked her every attempt to escape. The woman in the stained nightgown stood in her memory, her needle-sharp smile burning into Lisa's mind, a promise of something ancient, something hungry, waiting just beyond the reach of her headlights. Lisa's hands trembled as she gripped the wheel, the engine's growl her only anchor in a world that was unraveling. The cow mailbox appeared again, its rusted surface now gleaming with an unnatural sheen, as if polished by unseen hands. The dead tree loomed, its branches twisting into new shapes. Letters, maybe spelling out a warning or a curse. The farmhouse's green glow pulsed in the distance, faster now, a heartbeat calling her back. The air in the cab was freezing, her breath fogging the windshield, the heater's warmth swallowed by a cold that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. She tried to focus, to cling to her training, her 8 years of navigating America's highways. "You're Lisa Patterson. You've driven through blizzards, breakdowns, and bandits. You can handle this." But this wasn't a storm or a mechanical failure. This was something that knew her name, that whispered to her in voices that weren't human. The CB radio, though unplugged, hummed faintly, the static forming words. "Lisa, stop. We're so lonely." She slammed her fist against the dashboard, silencing the hum. but the voices lingered, burrowing deeper into her mind. The road stretched ahead, unchanging the loop, tightening its grip. Lisa's odometer remained frozen, her GPS dead, her sense of time slipping away. She'd been driving for hours, days maybe, but the dashboard clock hadn't moved past 11:23 p.m. The world outside her truck was a mockery of reality, the landmarks repeating with cruel precision. The red barn, the dead field, the tricycle in the yard, all were constants, but they were changing, becoming more vivid, more menacing. The tricycle's handlebars now turned toward her as she passed, as if tracking her movement. The sandbox's ripples formed clearer patterns, symbols that pulsed with the same green glow as the farmhouse. Lisa's eyes darted to her mirrors, expecting to see the woman in the nightgown again. The road behind her was empty, but the air felt charged, as if something were pacing her just beyond sight. She slowed at another intersection, hoping for a way out, but the road branched into two identical paths, both leading back to the cow mailbox. This isn't a road. It's a cage. Her heart pounded her mind, racing for a plan. She needed to break the loop, to find something, someone who could help her navigate back to reality. The farmhouse appeared again, its porch light now blazing, casting long shadows that danced across the yard. Lisa's instincts screamed at her to keep driving, but her desperation won. She needed answers, a map, a voice, anything to anchor her to the world she knew. She pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under her tires, each sound amplified in the suffocating silence. The porch light flickered, dimming, as she stepped out of the cab, her flashlight and tire iron in hand. The air was colder now, biting her skin, the metallic stench now laced with something rancid, like meat left to rot. She approached the porch, her boots sinking into the soft earth, the ground almost pulling at her. The sandbox caught her eye, the sand now swirling, forming a face, a child's face, its mouth open in a silent scream. Lisa's breath caught her flashlight beam trembling as it swept the yard. The toys were different now. The doll's single eye was gone, replaced by a dark, hollow socket. The tricycle's seat was stained with something dark, wet, glistening. She forced herself to focus on the door, knocking hard, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Hello, I'm a truck driver. I need directions. Please, is anyone there?" The whispers returned louder, coming from inside the house, from the trees, from the ground itself. "Lisa, stay. You're home." The porch light flared, then went out, plunging the yard into darkness. Her flashlight flickered its beam, weakening, as if the batteries were dying, though she'd replaced them just days ago. She knocked again, harder, her tire iron raised. "Open the door. I know you're in there." The whispers stopped, replaced by a single sound, a low, wet chuckle, like something choking on its own blood. The door creaked open just an inch, revealing nothing but darkness. Lisa's flashlight beam pierced the gap, illuminating a hallway lined with peeling wallpaper, the air inside thick with dust and decay. A shadow moved at the far end, too tall, too thin to be human. Her heart stopped as the woman in the nightgown stepped into the light, her face pale, her eyes black, voids, her smile a slash of sharp, glinting teeth. "You came back, Lisa," she said, her voice a hiss that echoed inside Lisa's skull. "We knew you would." Lisa stumbled back, her flashlight dropping its beam, spinning wildly across the porch. The woman didn't move, but her presence filled the air heavy, suffocating, pulling Lisa toward the open door. "Run. Now." She turned, sprinting for her truck, the ground sucking at her boots, the whispers rising into a scream. "You can't leave us." She climbed into the cab, slamming the door, her hands shaking as she started the engine. The rig roared to life, and she tore out of the driveway, the farmhouse's green glow fading in her mirrors, but not before she saw the woman standing in the road, her nightgown billowing, her smile promising she'd follow. The road was no longer just a trap. It was a hunter, its endless loop tightening around Lisa Patterson's rig like a predator closing in on its prey. The woman in the nightgown lingered in her mind, her black eyes and needle-sharp smile. A brand burned into Lisa's soul, promising that escape was a lie that this night would claim her. Lisa's truck thundered through the Arkansas darkness, the engine's roar a desperate cry against the silence that pressed in from all sides. The cow mailbox flashed by again, its surface now gleaming like polished bone, reflecting her headlights in a way that made her stomach lurch. The dead tree's branches twisted into new forms, words, names, her name. Lisa etched in gnarled wood. The farmhouse's green glow pulsed in the distance, a beacon that seemed to pull her closer, no matter which direction she drove. The air in the cab was ice cold, her breath fogging the windshield, the metallic stench now thick with the sweet rot of decay. Her odometer was still frozen, her GPS dead, her sense of time shattered. The dashboard clock flickered between 11:23 p.m. and random numbers 3, 17, 12, 09, 4444, as if time itself were mocking her. The whispers had returned no longer, confined to the radio, but woven into the hum of the engine, the creak of the trailer, the rush of air past her windows. "Lisa, you're ours. Stay with us." She gripped the wheel, her knuckles white, her mind clinging to the only thing keeping her sane, her training, her instinct, her refusal to give in. The road looped again, delivering her back to the red barn, its collapsed roof now gaping wider, like a mouth ready to scream. The tricycle in the yard was moving its wheels, spinning slowly, as if pushed by an invisible child. The sandbox's ripples formed clearer shapes, a hand, a face, a word. Stay. Lisa's heart pounded, her mind racing for a way out. She'd tried turning around, tried speeding up, tried stopping, but the loop held her relentless, unbreakable. Think, Lisa. There's a way out. There has to be. Her headlights caught a new figure in the road. The woman in the nightgown standing dead center, her stained gown billowing, though no wind stirred the air. Her black eyes locked onto Lisa's, her smile a slash of gleaming teeth. Lisa slowed her hands, trembling, her instincts screaming to avoid her. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help?" she called through the open window, her voice shaking but firm. The woman didn't answer, just stared. Her gaze, a physical weight pressing against Lisa's chest. Lisa tried to drive around her, easing the rig to the left, but the woman moved, glided, not walked, positioning herself in front of the truck again. Her movements were wrong, her feet never touching the ground, her body swaying like a puppet on invisible strings. Lisa's breath caught. She's not human. She put the truck in reverse, checking her mirrors, but her heart stopped. 6 more figures stood behind her rig, all in stained nightgowns, their faces pale, their eyes black voids, their smiles identical to the woman's. They stood motionless, staring, their presence a silent threat. The engines sputtered, the RPMs fluctuating wildly, the temperature gauge climbing into the red. Lisa smelled burning oil, a sharp, acrid stench that mixed with the rot in the air. Her truck, maintained meticulously for 3 years, was failing, as if the road itself were poisoning it. The figures began to move, closing in their gliding steps, silent, their smiles widening. Lisa's mind raced. They want me to stop. They need me to stop. She floored the gas, the truck lurching forward, aiming straight for the woman in the road. "Move, or I'll make you move." The woman didn't flinch. As the rig barreled toward her, she vanished, not stepped aside, not ran, but dissolved into the air like smoke. The figures behind her did the same, melting into the darkness, leaving the road empty. The engine roared back to life, the gauges stabilizing as if the truck had been freed from a spell. Lisa didn't stop to question it. She pushed the rig to its limit, the road blurring past the landmarks, flashing by the cow mailbox, the dead tree, the farmhouse. But now they seemed different, faded, as if losing their grip on her. The whispers returned louder, angrier, a chorus of voices screaming in her head. "You can't leave us, Lisa. You belong here. she ignored them, her focus razor sharp, her hands steady on the wheel. The road began to change, the trees thinning the air, warming the metallic stench, fading. A sign appeared ahead, rusted but legible. Highway 67, 5 miles. Lisa's heart leaped, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. She was breaking free, pulling away from the loop, from the things that hunted her. But as she glanced in her mirrors, she saw them, the figures, now dozens, standing at the edge of the road, their nightgowns fluttering, their black eyes glinting in the taillights. They didn't move, didn't chase, just watched their smiles, promising they'd wait. Forever, the Arkansas night clung to Lisa Patterson's rig like a living shadow, its darkness a weight that threatened to drag her back into the loop, back to the woman in the nightgown and her legion of hollow-eyed watchers. But the sign for Highway 67 glowed in her headlights, a beacon of salvation, promising a return to the world she knew. If only she could reach it before the road reclaimed her. Lisa's truck roared down the narrowing path, the engine straining as if fighting against an invisible force. The air was warmer now, the metallic stench fading, but the whispers lingered, a relentless drone in her mind. Lisa, you can't leave. We're part of you now. Her odometer twitched, finally, moving past 40 miles, a sign that the loop was weakening. But the landmarks still flickered past the cow mailbox, its surface now cracked, bleeding rust. The dead tree, its branches sagging as if exhausted. The farmhouse, its green glow dimming like a dying star. Her dashboard clock flickered erratically, jumping between times 11:23 p.m., 2:47 a.m., 6:19 p.m., as if the night were refusing to let her go. The road widened slightly, the trees thinning, revealing patches of starry sky. Lisa's heart pounded hope, battling fear. I'm close. I have to be. She pushed the rig harder, the tires humming against the asphalt, the trailer swaying as she took curves at dangerous speeds. The sign for Highway 67 appeared again, closer now, 2 miles. She could almost taste freedom, the familiar hum of a busy interstate, the chatter of other truckers on the CB. But the road wasn't done with her. The figures reappeared in her mirrors, not just the woman in the nightgown, but dozens of others, their stained gowns billowing, their black eyes glinting like polished obsidian. They lined the road now, standing shoulder to shoulder, their smiles sharp and hungry. Lisa's breath hitched, her hands tightening on the wheel. They're not real. They can't be. But their presence was a weight pressing against her chest, slowing her thoughts, urging her to stop, to surrender. The engine sputtered again, the gauges flickering, the cab filling with that rancid, sweet stench. Lisa's eyes darted to the dashboard, where the temperature gauge was climbing, the oil pressure dropping. Not now, Please, not now. She slammed her fist against the wheel, willing the truck to keep going. The figures began to move, gliding alongside the road, keeping pace with her rig, their faces unchanging, their smiles fixed. She heard their voices, not through the radio, but in the air, in her head, a chorus of pleas and threats. Stay, Lisa. You're home. You'll never leave us. She spotted a truck stop, ahead its lights blazing a beacon of normalcy in the nightmare. The sign read, Highway 67, truck stop, open 24 hours. Lisa's heart leaped. People. Safety. She pushed the rig to its limit. The engine screaming, the trailer rattling as she barreled toward the lot. The figures in her mirrors grew closer, their gliding steps now a blur, their voices rising into a scream that shook the cab. The truck stop's lights grew brighter, revealing parked rigs, a diner, people moving inside. Lisa pulled in the tires, screeching as she stopped near the main building, her hands shaking as she killed the engine. The silence was deafening. The whispers gone, the air warm again. Lisa climbed out her legs, unsteady, her flashlight and tire iron still in hand. The truck stop was alive with activity. Truckers fueling up, a cashier ringing up purchases, the smell of coffee and fried food cutting through the lingering stench of decay. She stumbled toward the diner, her eyes scanning the lot, expecting to see the figures, but they were gone. Her mirrors showed only her rig, its trailer gleaming under the lot's floodlights, as if nothing had happened. She called the Arkansas State Police from a payphone inside, her voice trembling as she recounted her ordeal. The loop, the woman, the figures, the whispers. The dispatcher listened, her tone calm, but unsurprised. Ma'am, you're the 7th driver this year to report something like this on those back roads. We've sent patrols, but those roads, they don't exist on our maps. Just forest. Lisa's blood ran cold as the dispatcher continued explaining that the area was once Millfield, a town abandoned after a chemical explosion in the 1970s. The residents, mostly found dead in their nightgowns, had been altered by the chemicals, their bodies unrecognizable. Altered how Lisa didn't ask, didn't want to know. She returned to her truck, her hands still shaking, and drove to the interstate, the road now straight, normal, alive with traffic. The CB crackled with familiar chatter, her GPS flickering back to life. She was free, but the weight of the night lingered a shadow in her mind, whispering that it wasn't over. Lisa Patterson thought she'd escaped the nightmare of Millfield. But 3 weeks later, a package arrived at her doorstep. Its contents, a chilling reminder that some roads never let you go. A child's doll. Its nightgown, stained with dark, wet patches, stared up at her with a single hollow eye, promising that the darkness was still watching, still waiting. Lisa sat in her living room in North Carolina, the package on her coffee table, its brown paper torn open, revealing the doll inside. It was identical to the one she'd seen in the sandbox at the farmhouse. Plastic, worn its one eye, missing its nightgown, stained with something that smelled of decay and metal. A note was pinned to its chest, written in faded ink. The handwriting, shaky but deliberate. Thank you for visiting Millfield. We hope you'll come back soon. We get so few visitors, and we're always looking for new residents. The note was signed with dozens of names, each in a different hand, as if the entire town had conspired to write it. Her heart pounded, her hands trembling as she dropped the doll back into the box. How did they find me? She'd given no one her address, hadn't told anyone about Millfield, except the police. The postmark on the package was from a post office closed since 1978. Its stamp outdated, its edges yellowed. Lisa's mind raced the memory of the nightgown woman's smile flashing before her eyes, those black voids promising she'd never escape. She threw the doll in the trash, double bagging it, but sleep eluded her that night, the whispers echoing in her dreams. You're ours, Lisa. You can't leave. The next morning, the doll was back on her doorstep, untouched. Its nightgown wetter, its stench stronger. Lisa burned it in her backyard, the flames hissing as they consumed the plastic, the smoke curling into shapes that looked too much like faces. But a week later, another package arrived, identical, the same note, the same signatures. She moved twice, changing her address, her routes, but the packages followed each doll a reminder of Millfield, each note a promise that the town wasn't done with her. Lisa threw herself into her work, taking longer routes, avoiding Arkansas entirely. She installed multiple GPS units, carried paper maps, joined online trucker forums where drivers shared stories of roads to avoid. She wasn't alone. Others had encountered Millfield, or places like it towns that shouldn't exist, populated by things that weren't human. The forums were filled with warnings. Stay off back roads in Arkansas. Don't follow detour signs. If you see a cow mailbox, turn around. But no one mentioned the dolls, the packages, the relentless pursuit that marked Lisa as its own. She researched Millfield, digging through old records, newspaper archives, anything to understand what she'd faced. The town had died in 1973, its residents poisoned by a chemical plant. Explosion. Their bodies found in nightgowns. Their faces altered, waxy pale with eyes too large, mouths too wide. The government had razed the town, let the forest reclaim it, but truckers and hikers still reported seeing it, encountering its residents who seemed unaware, their time had passed. The post office, closed for decades, still processed mail, always to drivers who'd strayed into Millfield's grasp, always with stamps long discontinued. Lisa's nights were haunted by the woman's smile, the figures in her mirrors, the whispers that followed her even on busy interstates. She'd wake in her sleeper berth, certain she'd heard the sandbox's sand shifting, the tricycle's wheels spinning. Her truck, once her sanctuary, felt tainted, its cab colder, its shadows deeper. She installed cameras inside and out, but they showed nothing. No figures, no dolls, no proof of the nightmare that stalked her. The final package arrived a year later on the anniversary of her escape. This doll was different. Its face wasn't plastic, but soft, almost human. Its single eye, a perfect replica of Lisa's own, green and piercing. The note was shorter, written in her own handwriting. "Welcome home, Lisa. We're waiting." She didn't burn this one. She locked it in a metal box, buried it in her backyard, and sold her house the next week. But as she drove her next load, the whispers returned fainter, but persistent, carried on the wind. "You can't bury us, Lisa. We're part of you now." Lisa still drives. Her roots, carefully planned, her instincts sharper than ever. She avoids back roads, detour signs, anything that smells of Millfield. But she knows the truth. Some roads don't let you go. Some towns don't forget. And somewhere in the dark heart of Arkansas, Millfield waits its nightgown-clad residents, watching their smiles, promising that one day Lisa will return. The desert stretched endlessly before Marcus Thompson, a void of black swallowing his headlights on Interstate 40. It was 11 p.m., March 2020, and the New Mexico night pressed against his truck's windows like a living thing, heavy with secrets. The hum of his white Peterbilt's engine was his only companion until the radio crackled. A voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the silence. "Eastbound driver, in the white Peterbilt, your left rear trailer tire's about to blow. Pull over now, or you're done." Marcus froze, his hands tightening on the wheel. No one was on the road, no headlights behind him. Just darkness. Who could see his truck? Who knew his tire was failing? The voice wasn't a suggestion. It was a command laced with a chilling certainty that made his skin prickle. He glanced at his mirrors, expecting to see a tailing rig, but the highway was a desolate ribbon of asphalt, mocking his isolation. Marcus Thompson, a veteran trucker with 12 years of cross-country hauls, wasn't one to spook easily. He'd driven through blizzards, dodged jackknifed trailers, and navigated the loneliest stretches of America's highways without flinching. His Cobra 29 CB radio, a battered relic from his first rig, had been his lifeline through countless nights, its static-filled chatter a comfort against the void. But tonight, that comfort shattered. The voice on Channel 19 wasn't the usual banter of truckers trading road conditions or diner tips. It was precise, personal, and impossible. Marcus scanned the horizon, his headlights slicing through the inky blackness, revealing nothing but sand and scrub. The New Mexico desert was a place where the world felt thin, where the stars above seemed too close, watching like unblinking eyes. He adjusted his grip, the leather of his gloves creaking, and tried to shake the unease creeping up his spine. The voice had called him out by his truck, a white Peterbilt, unmistakable on this empty stretch. But how no other vehicles had passed him in hours. The nearest truck stop was 50 miles back, a flickering oasis of neon and diesel fumes he'd left behind at dusk. Marcus keyed the mic, his voice steady, despite the knot in his gut. This is the White Pete, eastbound on I-40. Who's this? You got eyes on me. Static answered a low hiss that seemed to pulse with intent, like a heartbeat in the wires. He waited, breath held, but no reply came. The silence was worse than the voice silence that felt alive, listening, waiting for him to make a move. He slowed his rig, the engine's rumble softening as he eased toward the shoulder. The warning about his tire gnawed at him. Tire blowouts were a trucker's nightmare. 80,000 pounds of steel and cargo could spin out of control in seconds, turning a routine haul into a death sentence. Marcus wasn't about to gamble with that. He flicked on his hazard lights, their amber glow pulsing like a warning flare in the night, and grabbed his flashlight. The desert air hit him as he stepped out cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of dust and sagebrush. The beam of his flashlight danced across the trailer, catching the glint of chrome and the worn lettering of his company logo. He moved to the left rear tire, heart pounding, and crouched to inspect it. There it was, a bulge on the sidewall, a grotesque swelling that strained the rubber like a tumor ready to burst. The tire was a heartbeat away from blowing, just as the voice had said. Marcus's breath caught his mind racing. How could anyone know? No one could see that kind of damage from a distance, especially not in the dark. He ran the flashlight along the tire's edge, the beam trembling slightly in his hand. The defect was real, undeniable, and catastrophic. If he'd kept driving at highway speed, he'd have been a wreck waiting to happen. His rig a twisted heap in the desert. Marcus stood his boots, crunching on the gravel shoulder, and scanned the highway again. Nothing. No headlights. No tail lights. No sign of another soul. The stars above were mercilessly bright, casting the desert in a ghostly silver glow, but they revealed no answers. He climbed back into the cab, the warmth of the heater a small comfort against the chill that had settled in his bones. He grabbed the mic again, his voice sharper now. "Hey, Shadow. This is the White Pete. You were right about the tire. I owe you one. Where are you running? I don't see you out here." The radio stayed silent for a long moment, then crackled to life. "Don't worry about where I am, driver. Just get that tire changed. You've got about 40 minutes before that sidewall gives out completely." The precision of the warning hit Marcus like a physical blow. 40 minutes. No mechanic, no matter how seasoned, could predict a tire failure down to the minute. It was impossible, like knowing the exact moment a storm would break or a heart would stop. Marcus's mind churned, trying to rationalize it. Maybe another trucker had passed him earlier, spotted the tire in their headlights, and radioed ahead. But that didn't explain the absence of other vehicles, or the voice's eerie certainty. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. The tire needed changing, and he wasn't about to sit here questioning a warning that had just saved his life. As he pulled out his tools, the desert seemed to close in around him. The darkness, thicker, more oppressive. Every sound, the clank of his wrench, the hiss of the wind felt amplified, as if the night itself was watching him work. He loosened the lug nuts, the metal cold against his fingers, and glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing just beyond the flashlight's beam. The voice had called itself Shadow, a name that felt like a taunt, a reminder of the unseen presence that knew too much. Marcus's hands moved faster, driven by a growing urgency to get back on the road, to leave this stretch of highway behind. The tire change was routine muscle memory, taking over as he swapped the damaged wheel for the spare. But the voice's words echoed in his mind, looping like a song he couldn't shake. "Pull over now, or you're done." It wasn't just a warning. It was a command delivered with the weight of someone who'd seen what happened if he didn't listen. Marcus tightened the last lug nut, his breath visible in the cold air, and stepped back to inspect his work. The new tire looked solid, ready to carry him through the night. But the unease remained a splinter lodged in his thoughts. Who or what had spoken to him? And why did they care? Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow, the desert cold biting at his knuckles as he stowed his tools. The new tire was on, but the weight of that voice, Shadow, clung to him like damp cloth. He climbed back into the cab, the door shutting with a heavy thud that echoed in the empty night. The radio sat silent, its green display glowing faintly, daring him to reach for the mic. He hesitated, then keyed it. "Shadow, you still out there? I got the tire fixed. I owe you big time." The static hissed a low growl that seemed to mock his attempt at gratitude. Then the voice returned calm and deliberate, like a parent guiding a child. "Double-check the third lug nut from the top. Marcus, it's loose. And watch your speed. There's a trooper running radar 15 miles ahead, Marcus froze the mic still in his hand. The voice had used his name, not White Pete or Driver Marcus. His heart thudded against his ribs, a primal rhythm that drowned out the hum of the heater. He hadn't shared his name on the radio, not tonight, not ever on Channel 19. Truckers used handles, not real names, to keep things impersonal safe. Yet this voice knew him as if it had been riding shotgun in his cab all along, watching his every move. He set the mic down, his fingers trembling, and grabbed the flashlight again. The desert night pressed against the windows, a black tide threatening to spill inside. He stepped out the gravel, crunching under his boots, and aimed the flashlight at the new tire. The third lug nut from the top gleamed in the beam, slightly misaligned, not fully seated. He cursed under his breath, the sound swallowed by the vastness around him. He'd been changing tires for a decade, and missing a lug nut wasn't something he did. Yet there it was, loose, just as the voice had said. Marcus tightened it, the wrench's clank, a sharp protest against the silence. His mind raced, trying to piece together how someone could know such a specific detail. A loose lug nut wasn't visible from a distance, not even with binoculars, not in the dark. This wasn't a lucky guess. It was impossible knowledge delivered with a calm that made his stomach twist. Back in the cab, Marcus sat for a moment, staring at the radio. The green glow of the display seemed to pulse alive with secrets. He wanted to demand answers, to know who this shadow was, but something told him to keep driving, to put distance between himself and this stretch of I-40. He started the engine, the Peterbilt roaring to life, and pulled back onto the highway. The desert unfolded before him, endless and unyielding, the stars above like 1,000 eyes tracking his progress. He kept his speed under 70, heeding the voice's warning about the trooper. Sure enough, 15 miles later, his radar detector beeped, and he spotted the faint glow of a patrol car tucked behind a rise, its lights off, but its presence undeniable. The voice had been right again. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white beneath his gloves. The voice wasn't just predicting road hazards. It was reading his life like an open book. He tried to focus on the road, the white lines blurring into a hypnotic rhythm, but his thoughts kept circling back to the radio. Who could know so much? A fellow trucker with some kind of tech, a prankster with a powerful radio setup. But no trucker, no matter how skilled, could see a loose lug nut from miles away or know about a trooper's exact location. The desert seemed to whisper answers just out of reach, its vastness a canvas for his growing dread. He reached for the mic again, unable to resist. "Shadow? You're freaking me out, man. How do you know all this? You got a drone or something?" The static crackled. Then the voice returned softer, now tinged with something like sadness. "No drones, Marcus. Just experience. I've been on this road a long time, longer than you'd believe." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus couldn't grasp. He wanted to press further, but the voice continued unprompted. "How's your daughter, Sarah, doing with her nursing program? Must be tough, her being so far away." Marcus's breath stopped. Sarah. His daughter, studying nursing in Ohio, 800 miles from home. He hadn't mentioned her to anyone, not his dispatcher, not his buddies at the truck stop. Sarah was his private pride, the reason he pushed through long hauls to pay her tuition. The voice's casual mention of her name felt like a violation, a cold finger tracing down his spine. He slammed the mic down, his heart racing. This wasn't a prank. No one could know about Sarah unless they'd been digging into his life, following him in ways he couldn't imagine. The cab felt smaller, the darkness outside closer, as if the night itself was listening. He drove on the highway, stretching into infinity, each mile marker a taunt. The voice's knowledge gnawed at him, a puzzle with no edges. He tried to recall every interaction he'd had recently, conversations at truck stops, calls with his dispatcher, even casual chats with other drivers. Nothing explained how someone could know so much. The desert's silence was oppressive, broken only by the drone of his engine and the occasional hiss of static from the radio. He turned the volume down, but the quiet was worse, amplifying his thoughts. "Who are you? Shadow? What do you want?" The voice spoke again, unprompted, as if sensing his turmoil. "That chest pain you've been having, Marcus? It's not just heartburn. Get it checked when you get home. Sarah needs her dad." Marcus's hand flew to his chest, where a dull ache had been nagging him for weeks. He'd dismissed it as stress, too much. Coffee, too many greasy diner meals. But the voice's words cut deeper, stirring a fear he hadn't dared acknowledge. The pain was real, a tightening in his ribs that came and went, always worse at night. He hadn't told a soul, not his wife, not his doctor. Yet Shadow knew as if it could see inside his body, his life, his fears. Marcus's mind spun the highway, blurring before him. The voice wasn't just a warning, it was a mirror, reflecting truths he'd buried. He wanted to shut it out, to drown it in the roar of the engine, but it lingered a presence as tangible as the wheel in his hands. The desert stretched on its emptiness, a canvas for his growing paranoia. Was he being watched, tracked? Or was this something else? Something older, tied to the road itself. The stories truckers told at late-night diners, ghostly hitchhikers, phantom rigs, voices from nowhere flashed through his mind. He'd always laughed them off, chalking them up to fatigue and too much caffeine. Now he wasn't so sure. The highway seemed to hum beneath Marcus's tires, a low vibration that matched the pulse of his unease. The voice on Channel 19 had peeled back layers of his life, exposing secrets he'd kept even from himself. Sarah's nursing school, his chest pain, details no stranger could know. He drove through the New Mexico night, the stars above like a frozen audience watching his every move. Then, at mile marker 127, his headlights caught a flash of white by the roadside, a wooden cross weathered and adorned with faded plastic flowers. The voice's words echoed in his mind. "You'll see the cross at mile 127. My wife put it there." Marcus's breath hitched. He didn't want to stop, didn't want to face what might be waiting. But the cross called to him, a beacon in the dark, demanding answers. Marcus slowed the rig, the engine's growl softening as he pulled onto the shoulder. The cross stood alone. Its white paint chipped the flowers, brittle from years of sun and wind. He sat in the cab, the radio silent, but heavy with potential. Its green glow, a constant reminder of the voice that had guided him. The desert was still the air, thick, with a quiet that felt like anticipation. Marcus grabbed his flashlight, his movements deliberate, as if any sudden motion might wake something sleeping in the night. He stepped out, the cold biting at his exposed skin, and approached the cross, his boots sinking slightly into the sandy earth. The beam of his flashlight illuminated a small metal plate at the base of the cross, its inscription barely legible in the dim light. Thomas Knight Rider Williams, 1962-2014. Beloved husband and father, keep the shiny side up. Marcus's heart stopped. Knight Rider. The voice had hinted at a name, a handle. My handle used to be Knight Rider. He reread the inscription, the words searing into his mind. Thomas Williams, dead for 6 years, killed in a tire blowout at this exact spot. The same kind of accident Marcus had just avoided, thanks to the voice's warning. His hands shook the flashlight beam, wavering across the cross, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and move. He stumbled back to the cab, his breath ragged, and grabbed the mic. Knight Rider, you still out there? His voice was a mix of fear and defiance, demanding answers from the void. The radio crackled, and the voice returned its tone, heavy with a tenderness that seemed to echo across the desert. I'm always out here, Marcus. This highway, it holds on to some of us. I couldn't help myself that night. but maybe I can help others avoid the same fate. The words were a confession, a lament spoken by someone or something tied to this stretch of asphalt, forever bound to mile marker 127. Marcus's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the impossible. A dead man's voice, guiding him, saving him. He wanted to dismiss it as a hallucination, a trick of fatigue and desert isolation. But the cross was real, the tire bulge was real, and the voice's knowledge was undeniable. He sat in the cab, the engine idling, and stared at the cross through his windshield. The flowers faded to gray, seemed to sway in a breeze he couldn't feel. He thought of the stories he'd heard from other truckers, tales of voices on the radio, of rigs that appeared and vanished, of highways that seemed to watch and wait. He'd scoffed at them, but now they felt like warnings he'd ignored. The voice spoke again, unprompted, its tone softer, almost pleading. Take care of yourself, Marcus. Get that chest checked. Sarah needs her dad around for a long time. The mention of Sarah again sent a jolt through him, a reminder of the stakes. He thought of her face, her determination to become a nurse, the way she'd hugged him before leaving for college. The voice wasn't just saving him from a blowout, it was urging him to live, to stay for her. Marcus's throat tightened emotions he'd buried under years of long hauls, bubbling to the surface. He wanted to thank the voice, to ask more, but the radio fell silent, the static gone, leaving only the hum of his engine and the weight of the desert night. He drove on the cross, fading in his rearview mirror, but its image burned into his mind. The highway stretched ahead, a black ribbon under the star-lit sky, but it no longer felt empty. It was alive, pulsing with stories, with ghosts, with the echoes of those who'd never made it home. Marcus kept his speed steady, his eyes scanning the road for the trooper he'd been warned about, but his thoughts were on Knight Rider. Thomas Williams, a man who'd died 6 years ago, yet somehow lingered, watching over this desolate stretch, saving drivers from the fate he'd suffered. The thought was both comforting and terrifying, a reminder that the road held more than asphalt and mile markers. As he approached Albuquerque, the first signs of civilization appeared: a distant glow of lights, the faint hum of traffic. Marcus felt a strange relief, as if crossing into the city's orbit might break the spell of the desert. But the voice's warnings stayed with him, etched into his thoughts, like the inscription on that cross. He glanced at the radio, half expecting it to crackle again, but it remained silent. The night pressed on the stars above, unyielding, and Marcus drove with a new awareness, a sense that the highway was more than a path. It was a place where the living and the dead shared the same road, their stories intertwined in the dark. The city lights of Albuquerque flickered on the horizon, a promise of safety that Marcus wasn't sure he could trust. The cross at mile marker 127 lingered in his mind, its faded flowers, a silent testament to Thomas Williams, the man who called himself Night Rider. The voice on Channel 19 had saved his life, but its knowledge, his daughter, his health, the loose lug nut, felt like a debt he couldn't repay. As he drove, the radio hummed softly, its silence a challenge, daring him to ask the questions burning in his chest. Who was Night Rider? Really? And why was he still here, whispering warnings from a grave 6 years cold? Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel, the desert's vastness giving way to the city's edge. But the weight of the night followed him, heavy as the stars above. Marcus pulled into a truck stop just outside Albuquerque, the neon signs casting a harsh glow over the lot. He needed coffee, a moment, to think, to process the impossible. The diner was a familiar haunt, its formica counters and jukebox a slice of normalcy after the strangeness of the road. He slid into a booth, the vinyl creaking under his weight, and ordered a black coffee, the steam rising like a ghost from the mug. The other truckers in the diner were quiet, their faces etched with the fatigue of long hauls, their conversations muted. Marcus listened, half hoping to hear someone mention Night Rider, a shared story that might anchor his experience in reality. But the chatter was mundane: fuel prices, weather, the usual gripes. No one spoke of voices from the dead. He sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him, and pulled out his phone. The signal was weak, but he typed Thomas Night Rider Williams into a search engine, his fingers clumsy on the small screen. The results were sparse, but chilling. A local news article from 2014 detailed a fatal crash on I-40 mile marker 127. Thomas Williams, a veteran trucker, had died when his rig's tire blew out, sending him careening off the road into a ravine. The article mentioned his CB handle, Night Rider, and quoted his wife, Linda, who'd placed the cross at the site. He loved the road, she'd said. He was always helping other drivers, even strangers. Marcus's chest tightened, the ache he'd ignored flaring again. The voice had been real, tied to a man who'd lived and died on this highway. He scrolled further, finding a trucker forum buried in the search results. The thread was old, but the posts were alive with stories. Drivers claiming to have heard Night Rider on Channel 19, always at night, always near mile. Marker 27. Warnings about road hazards, mechanical failures, even personal advice. Each post echoed Marcus's experience. One driver wrote about a near miss with a deer guided by a voice that knew his name. Another mentioned a warning about black ice delivered with eerie precision. The thread had dozens of replies spanning years, all describing the same calm, sad voice. Marcus's coffee grew cold as he read the diner's hum fading into the background. Night Rider wasn't a myth. He was a presence, a guardian, bound to the road. Marcus left the diner, the night air sharp against his skin, and climbed back into his rig. The radio sat silent, but he could feel its weight, a conduit to something beyond. He keyed the mic, his voice low. Night Rider, if you're still out there, I saw your cross. I know who you are. Thank you. The static answered soft and steady, but no voice came. Marcus started the engine. The Peterbilts rumble, a familiar comfort, and pulled back onto I-40. The city lights faded behind him, the desert reclaiming the road, its vastness a reminder of how small he was, how fragile. He drove with purpose, now the cross a fixed point in his mind, a symbol of the man who'd reached across death to save him. The highway stretched on its rhythm, hypnotic, but Marcus's thoughts were sharp-focused. He replayed the voice's warnings, each one a lifeline. The tire, the trooper. Sarah, his chest. Night Rider hadn't just saved his rig, he'd saved his future. Marcus thought of his daughter, her smile, her ambition. He'd been ignoring the chest pain for too long, brushing it off as a nuisance. But the voice's urgency had shifted something in him. He made a mental note to call his doctor when he reached Phoenix to book the appointment he'd been avoiding. The road ahead felt different now, not just a path to his destination, but a place where the past lingered, where the dead could still speak. As he drove, the radio crackled faintly, a whisper of static that felt like a presence. Marcus didn't reach for the mic. He didn't need to. Night Rider was there, in the hum of the radio, in the shadows of the desert, in the cross that marked a life cut short. The highway was more than asphalt. It was a tapestry of stories, of lives lost and lives saved, woven together by voices that refused to fade. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, the stars above guiding him, and felt a strange peace. He wasn't alone out here. Not tonight. Not ever. The road to Phoenix was a blur of asphalt and starlight. Marcus's mind tethered to the voice that had called him by name. Night Rider's warnings echoed each word, a weight pressing against his chest, literally. The dull ache he'd ignored for weeks flared with every breath, a reminder of the voice's final plea. Get that chest checked. He reached Phoenix at dawn, the city's sprawl, a stark contrast to the desert's emptiness. The delivery went smoothly, auto parts unloaded without incident, but Marcus's thoughts were elsewhere. He found a clinic near the truck stop, a sterile building that smelled of antiseptic and fear. As he sat in the waiting room, the radio's static played in his mind. Night Rider's voice, a ghost that wouldn't leave. The doctor's verdict would change everything. A truth Marcus wasn't ready to face. The clinic was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights, a stark difference from the open road. Marcus filled out forms, his hand shaking as he wrote his name. The memory of Knight Rider's cross vivid in his mind. The nurse called him back, her smile professional but distant, and led him to an exam room. The doctor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, listened as Marcus described the chest pain, intermittent, sharp worse at night. He didn't mention the voice, the radio, the cross. Those were secrets. He wasn't ready to share truths too raw for a stranger's ears. The doctor ordered tests, an EKG blood work, a stress test. Marcus sat through them, the machines beeping and whirring, each sound a reminder of the fragility of his body, of the life he'd taken for granted. The results came back faster than he expected. The doctor sat across from him, his face serious, the kind of look that carried bad news. "Mr. Thompson, you have a serious heart condition, coronary artery disease. One of your arteries is nearly blocked. If you'd ignored this much longer, you'd have been at risk for a massive heart attack, likely while driving." Marcus's stomach dropped, the room tilting slightly. The doctor continued explaining the need for immediate surgery, a stent to keep the artery open. Marcus nodded, his mind numb, but one thought burned through the fog. Knight Rider had known. The voice had seen what no one else could, had warned him not just of a tire, but of a ticking bomb in his chest. He left the clinic with a surgery date and a prescription, the weight of the diagnosis settling over him like dust. Back in his rig, he sat in the cab, the radio silent, but looming. He thought of Sarah, her voice on their last call, bright and full of hope. Knight Rider's words. Sarah needs her dad felt like a promise he had to keep. He called her, the phone ringing, until her voicemail picked up. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice rough. "Just checking in. Got some stuff to take care of, but I'll be home soon. Love you." He hung up, the ache in his chest, more than physical, now a mix of fear and gratitude. Marcus drove back to Michigan, the long haul giving him time to think. The highway felt different, alive, with the ghosts of those who'd traveled it before. He passed mile markers, each one a reminder of Knight Rider's cross, of the man who died but never left. He researched Thomas Williams again, digging deeper into online archives. A trucking magazine from 2014 described him as a legend, a driver who'd stop to help anyone from changing tires to sharing fuel. His wife, Linda, had spoken of his love for the road, his habit of checking in on Channel 19, offering advice to newbies. Marcus found a photo, Thomas, broad-shouldered, smiling beside his rig, his eyes kind but tired. The same kind of tired Marcus felt now. He stopped at a diner in Oklahoma, the kind of place where truckers swapped stories over coffee and pie. He asked about Knight Rider, keeping his tone casual, but the other driver's eyes sharpened. An older man, his face lined with years of sun and wind, leaned in. "You heard him, didn't you?" "On 19, near 127. Marcus nodded, and the man shared his own story, a warning about a bridge closure delivered by a voice that knew his name. Others chimed in their tales, eerily similar. Night Rider was a constant, a guardian who appeared when the road turned deadly, his voice a lifeline in the dark. Marcus drove on the stories, piling up in his mind, each one a thread in a tapestry he couldn't fully see. The highway was more than a route. It was a place where time blurred, where the dead could reach out and touch the living. He thought of his surgery, the cold reality of his heart condition, and felt a strange calm. Night Rider had given him a chance, a warning that had saved not just his rig, but his life. As he crossed into Michigan, the familiar fields and forests, a comfort he vowed to honor, that gift to live for Sarah, for himself, for the road that had shaped him. The Michigan skyline greeted Marcus like an old friend. The rolling fields, a stark contrast to the desert's stark beauty. His surgery was scheduled for next week, a stent to keep his heart beating a second chance he owed to a voice from beyond. The radio in his Peterbilt sat silent, but its presence was a constant, a reminder of Night Rider's warnings of the cross at mile marker 127. Marcus drove with a new awareness, the highway no longer just a job, but a living thing, woven with stories of those who'd come before. He passed a truck stop, its neon sign buzzing in the dusk, and felt a pull to share his story, to warn others. Night Rider's legacy wasn't just a voice. It was a call to protect, to pass on the truth of the road's hidden dangers. Marcus parked at a rest area outside Detroit, the familiar hum of his rig, a comfort against the weight of his thoughts. He thought of the trucking community, the unspoken bond between drivers who shared the same roads, the same risks. Night Rider had been one of them, a man who died but never stopped helping. Marcus opened his laptop, the screen casting a pale glow in the cab, and logged into a trucker forum. He typed out his story, every detail: the tire, the voice, the cross, the heart condition. He didn't expect anyone to believe him, but he needed to share it, to add his voice to the chorus of warnings that echoed across the years. The responses came quickly. Drivers from across the country sharing their own encounters with Night Rider. A woman in Texas wrote about a warning that saved her from a washed-out road. A man in Arizona described a voice that guided him through a sandstorm. Each story was a piece of a larger puzzle, a network of lives touched by a man who'd refused to let death silence him. Marcus read, until his eyes burned the stories, blending into a single truth. The highway was alive, its ghosts as real as the asphalt beneath his tires. He closed the laptop, the cab dark, except for the radio's faint glow, and felt a connection to something bigger, something eternal. He drove home, the familiar streets of his neighborhood, a balm after weeks on the road. Sarah was waiting, her hug fierce and warm, her questions about his trip unanswered for now. Marcus didn't tell her about Knight Rider, not yet. Some stories needed time, needed distance. He went to his surgery, the hospital's sterile halls, a far cry from the open highway, and emerged with a stent in his heart, a renewed chance at life. The doctor's prognosis was good, but Marcus knew the real healing had started on I-40, in the voice that had called his name. Months later, Marcus returned to the road his Peterbilt humming beneath him. He drove through New Mexico again, his heart steady, his eyes sharp. As he approached mile marker 127, he slowed his headlights, catching the white cross, its flowers replaced with fresh ones, vibrant against the desert's gray. He pulled over, stepping out into the cool night, and stood before the cross. "Thank you, Thomas," he whispered, his voice swallowed by the wind. The radio crackled faintly, a soft static that felt like an answer, an acknowledgement from the man who'd never truly left. Marcus became a storyteller, sharing Knight Rider's tale at truck stops and forums, a warning wrapped in gratitude. The New Mexico State Police confirmed the stories, noting annual reports of Knight Rider's warnings, always on July 1st, the anniversary of his death. Marcus learned that dozens of drivers owed their lives to the voice on Channel 19, a guardian who watched over the road's lonely stretches. He drove with his radio tuned to 19, listening for the static that might carry Knight Rider's voice again. It never came, but Marcus didn't need it to. The cross, the stories, the road itself, they were enough. The highway stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt under a starlit sky, and Marcus drove with purpose. He was part of something larger. Now, a community bound by the road, by the voices that lingered in the dark. Knight Rider had saved him, and in return, Marcus carried his story, a light against the highway's shadows. The road was watching, always watching, but it was also protecting its ghosts, standing guard over those who kept the wheels turning. Marcus smiled, the ache in his chest gone, and drove into the night, the radio's hum, a quiet promise of connection, of survival, of home.